Hello and welcome to the launch of the Startup Nations Standards Report 2025. I'm Sarah Sommersgutter and I'll be guiding you through today's event. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll share key insights from this year's report, hear reflections from experts of the Standards Steering Committee, and listen to perspectives from member states that are actively shaping Europe's startup ecosystem. The event is being held as a live-streamed session, allowing us to bring together voices from across Europe. To open the event and set the scene, I'm pleased to welcome Arthur João, Executive Director of the Europe Startup Nations Alliance. Welcome, Arthur.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the launch of Startup Nations Standards Report 2025. Today's event is not only about presenting data or results, it is about reaffirming a shared European commitment to building a more competitive, connected, and startup-friendly Europe. ESNA was founded as a direct result of the EU Startup Nation Standard Ministerial Declaration that was signed by member states in March 2021. That declaration provided a clear political mandate: the need for a permanent European entity capable of turning shared ambition into coordinated action. The message behind that mandate was clear at the time, and it is even more pressing today. Startups are essential to Europe's future. They are playing a key part on driving innovation, creating high-quality jobs, and pushing for societal progress, which also significantly contribute to strengthening Europe's economic competitiveness, resilience, and sovereignty. But fragmented policies and uneven frameworks across member states were holding back Europe's full potential. ESNA was created to address that challenge. At the core of these efforts are the 8 standards of excellence. These standards define what it means to be a startup nation, from fast and cost-effective company creation to access to finance, talent mobility, innovation-friendly regulation, and fair stock option frameworks. By promoting the adoption of these standards, ESNA works to reduce fragmentation between member states by promoting harmonization and strengthening the cohesion of the European digital and single market. This is essential if European startups are to scale efficiently and compete globally. ESNA's vision is clear: to bring Europe to the lead of the global startup ecosystem. And our mission is equally concrete: to accelerate European entrepreneurship by improving national policy frameworks, continuously benchmarking progress, and transforming best practices into deployable policy based on real data. This is exactly where the Startup Nation Standards Report plays a central role. This report is ESNA's primary tool for tracking progress, supporting accountability, and enabling peer learning. It is not a ranking, and it is not an end in itself. It is a diagnostic instrument designed to help policymakers understand where progress is being made, where challenges persist, and where collective effort can have the greatest impact. The 2025 edition is particularly important. With 3 years of data now available, we can move beyond snapshots and start identifying trends, convergence, and policy maturity all across Europe. Today, you'll hear an overview of the ecosystem level results, reflections, and from the expert steering committee, as well as the perspectives from member states that stood out in this year's report. Together, these voices reflect what ESNA is about: coordination, evidence, and shared progress towards a stronger European startup ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur, for setting the context and reminding us why the Startup Nation standards matter at European level. We'll now move to an overview of the key findings from the Startup Nation Standards Report 2025. To walk us through the results and the main ecosystem level trends, I'm joined by Barbara Cagigal, Head of Standards and Policy. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Sarah. The Startup Nation Standards Report 2025 provides a snapshot of how startup-friendly policies are evolving across Europe, based on the implementation of the 8 dimensions in 24 participating countries. Starting with the big picture, overall implementation reached 70% in 2025, representing a 9 percentage point increase compared to 2024. This confirms a steady and consistent improvement over the past 3 years and suggests that many countries are moving from policy design into implementation and refinement. This progress is also visible at country level. 19 of the 24 surveyed countries improved their overall score in 2025, showing that this positive trajectory is shared across the ecosystem. Importantly, all 8 standards improved their scores in 2025 compared to 2024. Unlike last year, no standard now scores below 50%, pointing to a higher overall level of policy maturity. That said, progress is not uniform across all standards.
Interesting developments. Vera Barros, Senior Policy Expert at ESNA, now joins us. Vera, can you guide us through this year's results in more detail?
Of course. Looking first at the strongest performing areas, fast startup creation and smooth market entry, Standard 1, and access to finance, Standard 6, both reached 77% implementation in 2025. These standards are once again ranked in the top 3, reflecting sustained efforts to simplify company creation, reduce administrative friction for startups, and improve access to funding instruments. Digital First, Standard 8, also shows strong performance at 75%, confirming that the digitalization of public services is now a reality across much of Europe. At the other end of the spectrum, some standards remain more challenging. Innovation in regulation, Standard 4, continues to record the lowest overall score at 55%. However, it is important to highlight that it also registered one of the strongest year-on-year improvements, with an increase of 12 percentage points. This reflects growing awareness of the need for regulatory experimentation, sandboxes, and startup-sensitive rulemaking, even if full implementation remains complex. Social inclusion, diversity, and protecting democratic values, Standard 7, stands out as the fastest improving standard in 2025, with a remarkable 22 percentage point increase compared to last year, meaning that countries are paying more attention to inclusive policies, support for underrepresented founders, and the broader societal role of startups. In contrast, attracting and retaining talent, Standard 2, remain relatively stable. While many countries have strengthened programs to attract returning talent, challenges around visa processing times continue to limit faster progress in this area. These trends are also visible when we look within the standards at a substandard level. Among the 22 substandards, only 4 remain below the 50% threshold in 2025. This represents a clear improvement compared to 2024, when substandard scores ranged from 29 to 89%. The highest performing substandard this year is tech transfer policies, reaching 96% implementation, which indicates that countries have policies to ensure the commercialization of technology developed in academia. The lowest substandard score remains regulatory sandboxes at 35%. At indicator level, progress is equally visible. In 2025, 2 indicators reached full implementation, whereas none did so in 2024. Overall, 33 out of 41 indicators now score above 50%, and 7 indicators increased by 20 percentage points or more, while declines were limited to just 10 indicators.
Thank you, Vera. I now turn back to you, Barbara. How can we translate these results in terms of ecosystem evolution?
A key takeaway from this year's results is convergence. Standards that were previously lagging are now improving faster, suggesting that countries are prioritizing areas where gaps were most evident. At the same time, the report clearly shows that policy maturity varies by area. Some standards are approaching a phase of fine-tuning and optimization, while others still depend on deeper structural reforms and long-term political commitment. These findings underline why the Startup Nation Standards Report should be understood as a diagnostic tool, one that helps policymakers identify where to focus efforts next, rather than as a measure of overall ecosystem success.
Thank you both, Barbara and Vera, for that clear overview of this year's results. Now, to help interpret these findings and reflect on the broader implications, we'll now hear from members of this year's Startup Nation Standard Report Steering Committee, who supported the analysis and validation of the report. I'm pleased to introduce our first Steering Committee speaker, Ramon Campagnon, from the European Commission's Joint Research Centre, for a perspective on this year's Startup Nation Standards Report findings. Welcome, Ramon. How should policymakers use the SNS report beyond benchmarking?
The first thing to be reminded is that SNS is a policy tracking instrument. It's not a ranking. Therefore, it should be used as a tool to help member states. It can help to diagnose specific gaps, pinpointing where reforms in member states are needed. It is also a tool to learn from others, which are best practices, which are the experiences of other member states that have fully implemented all standards, which are policy templates that may be adapted somewhere else or locally. It is a tool that can check to which extent the measures done in the member states fit EU priorities. And finally, it is a tool to measure and monitor convergence over time.
What does this report tell us about long-term ecosystem development in Europe?
An important issue to mention is that the European ecosystem is becoming more mature. This comes from the data that shows that the implementation level is rising and that the gaps between the countries in Europe are closing. Particularly important and pleasing is that we have stronger performance in finance and digital services. In other words, we can say that the European ecosystem is becoming more resilient. However, we still have structural challenges. There's still a persistent lack of structural bottlenecks that could limit the speed of future innovation unless we address them directly. We have to work on regulations. We have to work on other important issues. One of them, for example, could be that the modest decline in talent attraction that we have been detecting could turn into a problem in the longer future. In summary, I would say that the report paints a very nice and excellent picture of a progressive and harmonized ecosystem in Europe, which is important for the long-term growth of Europe. However, it shows also that there are some potential challenges to sustain Europe's competitive edge in the coming decade. Therefore, my plea is that we are not going or should not fall into complacency, as a lot has been done already, but we still have to improve.
Thank you, Ramon. I'll now turn to Stefano Bonini, professor at Bocconi School of Management and at the Stevens Institute of Technology, for a complementary perspective on the findings. Hi, Stefano.
Dear ESNA community members, it is an honor and a privilege to share a few thoughts with you. During these past months, I have had the unique opportunity of contributing to the development of the 2025 Startup Nation Standards Report, a critically important initiative spearheaded by ESNA and its amazing team. And I thank Barbara, Kadrigal, and everyone at ESNA for the opportunity. I have devoted my entire academic and professional career to studying venture capital and its impact on economies, and I have a firm belief that a robust ecosystem in support of the development of new ventures, allowing companies to take technological and business risks, is the single most effective tool to foster growth, job creation, and societal welfare. The current state of global politics clearly signals that while a model of globalized development should still be the long-term goal of governments, a narrower model of regional integration is necessary to bridge the ongoing fractures. To this end, Europe has not only a necessity, but also more importantly, the opportunity to act as a single platform to spur growth at a much faster pace, to engineer new market champions that can rival those continuously produced in the United States, where VC and the startup ecosystems have been deploying their impact for over 50 years. The ESNA report is a fundamental step in this direction, highlighting the points of convergence, but crucially indicating where more needs to be done. I think that the evidence that you will read in the report indicates that the direction is right. However, two main pain points are, in my view, to be addressed without further ado. The first is the expansion of VC funding layers. One of the key issues of venture capital is that it provides a sequence of funding rounds of growing size. Fundamental advantage of the US market is the density of VC investors at all size levels, from small VC managing a few dozen millions to mega VC with billions under management. Differently in Europe, most VC funds manage relatively small amount of capital that prevent them to be significant players in larger size rounds. This is a key weakness, especially at a time where the EU-US relationships are tarnished, and in general, it transfers value overseas. The second is the development of an exit market. A robust EU-based exit market is of key importance to support the structural cycle of financial investors, be it at the private level through pre-IPO markets by fostering the growth of late-stage VC funding layers, or by finally creating a single unified large public market where companies can obtain the liquidity and price revelation accuracy that they currently cannot obtain locally. It is not surprising that most, if not all, EU IPOs happen in the US. This fuels a vicious cycle that pushes companies outside Europe, ultimately taking value away from this region. I really hope that this report can help in the process of strengthening the European startup market and unleash the tremendous potential of European ingenuity. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your contributions. One of the strengths of the Startup Nations Standards Framework is that it brings together diverse national experiences under a shared European approach. We'll now hear directly from the member states that stood out in this year's report, sharing their perspectives. Let's start with Belgium. Minister of the Middle Class, Self-Employed and SMEs, Ms. Eléonore Simonet, thank you for joining us. What does your country's performance in the SNS Report 2025 tell you about your ecosystem's evolution?
Belgium's performance in the 2025 Startup Nation Standard Report has been remarkably stable over recent years, with particularly strong results in access to finance. This shows that we have solid foundations in place, both private and public funding, diverse sources and great tax incentives for business angels to support entrepreneurs and startups. At the same time, the report highlights clear areas for improvement, especially in innovation in regulation, like expanding regulatory sandboxes and incentives to attract startups, also innovative public procurement, and finally, policies to attract and retain talent. My ambition is quite clear. We want to move beyond stability and push Belgium into the top tier of European startup ecosystems by tackling these challenges head-on.
What's your main priority for the next year when it comes to startup policy?
Our main priority is implementing the recently approved comprehensive SME plan, which includes around 89 measures. Several directly strengthen our startup ecosystem and address key SNS report gaps. Speeding up visa procedures for startups funders and skilled workers to attract more international talent. Creating regulatory sandboxes, starting with AI, and expanding to other innovative fields to foster innovation in a safe, stable environment. Making it easier for university spin-offs to access finance through clear, standardized agreements between universities and their spin-offs, and also further developing innovative public procurement, building on the InnoBrokers initiative. These steps will help us build a more dynamic, attractive ecosystem for startups here in Belgium.
Thank you. I'll now turn to Portugal. Mr. João Ferreira, Secretary of State for Economy. Thank you for joining us. What does your country's performance in the SNS report 2025 tell you about your ecosystem evolution?
No, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for the invitation, and I hope I can share with you some thoughts about what is wonderfully happening in Portugal. So the key message I take from the performance we have seen is that Portugal is moving from emerging to an established country with an established ecosystem. So the average implementation of the 8 standards increased to 76% in 2025 from the 70% in 24. And so this is the confirmation of a positive structural trajectory. So in terms of an ecosystem more mature, more scalable, more data-driven. Also the growth in startups, strength in high-tech and knowledge-intensive sectors, and sustained internationalization. So 3 main pillars, strengthened in innovation, internationalization, the growth is really positive. We continue to be, of course, focused, very focused with our foot on the ground, knowing that this is just one more step. There is still a lot to do in terms of infrastructure, knowledge, outputs, and regulatory execution. And so we'll continue to be completely focused on these goals.
What's your main priority for the next year when it comes to startup policy?
Well, the main priority is not only for startups in Portugal, but we have to be clear in one point. Economic growth is the main objective of this government. The economic growth is what will allow companies to have better salaries, better wages, better conditions for their workers, and in the end of the day to have the better condition for life of our citizens. So considering that economic growth is critical, is based in 3 main pillars. The first one is innovation. The second one is reducing all the constraints, bureaucracy, make life of companies easier, and in main reason for startups, which are the more agile, the more ambitious, typically the more fast-growing companies. And the third one, which is crucial for Portugal, is to see the world as our global platform for doing business. Startups do that from the day one, so it's very easy to understand this concept. So this is clear, the priority, helping our startups to scale up, to get scale from Portugal to the global markets, focusing in sectors like deep tech, high tech, biotech. So focusing really where added value can be had for our economy, for doing different products from what we do today, or using different processes from the ones we use today if we are doing the same products, but create a clear network between startups and the more implemented and industrial sectors in order to boost, to grow, to expand the added value of our economy. This is so clearly done by reducing regulatory friction. Is something we are working very, very hard. Attract and retain global talent. We improved in visas. We have more predictable rules, stronger EU level connections, and of course also as it has been said, also the support to ESNA, to the evolution we want from a European coordination level, to have a clear European execution capacity among all member states, with the transition we want to continue to follow from now on. And I think we are in a good moment. We are happy, and again, coming to the beginning of these questions, of this interview, if you want, happy from where we are, but completely conscious that there is still a long way to go. Europe must work together every day more. We are in a very global, competitive world, and so the 27 member states should work together as more as possible in order to be more competitive.
Thank you. Next, we hear from Slovenia. State Secretary at the Ministry of the Economy, Tourism and Sport, Mr. Matevž Frangež. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. What lessons or best practices would you share with other countries?
Well, first of all, Slovenia believes strongly that Europe as a whole has to improve the quality of European innovation and startup ecosystems. We are fans of Draghi report recommending that we have to close the innovation gap and to concentrate on new technologies, new products that will boost future European competitiveness. In Slovenia, we see a stable improvement in SNS 2025 ratings, and we are really glad that we've achieved this improvement. However, in many cases, we still perform low. So our attempt is to conclude the implementation of the Slovenian startup strategy in order to improve the quality of the ecosystem, the quality of the system startups are provided within Slovenia, because we believe that in these great economic changes driven by climate change, geopolitical influences, technological transformation, the transformation of the Slovenian economy can only happen if we concentrate on innovation, on new businesses and new industries.
What's your main priority for the next year when it comes to startup policy?
Work hand in hand with the ecosystem. The Slovenian recipe is to work closely with incubators, technology parks, investors, and startups in order to connect them in a shared and aligned vision. We want to improve the quality of our startup ecosystem and to make it one of Europe's best until 2030. With the ambitious goal building on Slovenian strengths, specifically the strength of our innovation ecosystem, the quality of our top-notch national research institutes, but also with the innovation-driven culture of the Slovenian people, we want to implement the 5 strategic initiatives set forward by the Slovenian startup strategy, which means very aligned policies with the EU 28 regime and the initiatives put forward by the European Commission.
Next, we will receive Jérôme Gazzano, Deputy Director of Innovation at the General Directorate of Enterprises of the Ministry of Economy and Finance of France. What's your main priority for the next year when it comes to startup policy?
Among our efforts, I'd like to mention the Deep Tech Plan, which since 2019 has aimed to increase the number of breakthrough innovation startups. We have made France the largest deep tech funding ecosystem in the European Union. In 2026, we intend to give this plan a new boost, aiming for 500 deep tech startup creations per year, and to better meet the challenges of financing, scaling up, and industrialization. Another key topic, the French Tech Visa, offers a simplified, fast-track process dedicated to ecosystem players, allowing them to obtain a renewable residence permit. This is essential in a context of strong international competition to attract top talents and deserves to be further simplified. Finally, I am especially proud of our Je choisis la French Tech program, I choose the French Tech, which ambition is expressed in a quantified target to double the amount of public and private procurement directed to startups by 2027, and a methodology that intervenes at every stage of the procurement chain. Tailored business meetings for public and private buyers, training, promotion of committed actors, and innovative startup solutions. Nearly 2 years after its launch, more than 700 companies choose La French Tech. To conclude, I would like to celebrate the rise of the overall country score around Europe, which has increased to 70% from 61% last year. We need a Europe strong in innovation, a Europe that takes risks and becomes more competitive in bringing breakthrough technologies to market. I warmly thank the ESNA team. You are a key contribution to these objectives, and your 2025 report shows that we are on the right way. Thank you.
And finally, Spain.
Hello, the new ESNA Startup Best Practice Survey brings very good news for Spain this year. It is one of the studies that are most reliable to understand how European startups and our ecosystems are behaving across Europe. This year, Spain clearly stands out. With a score of 93, Spain is among the leading countries in Europe because we are well above European average. These results shows the steady progress in a clear direction.
A key reason behind this progress is our startup law. Thanks to this law, Spain has become more attractive for entrepreneurs and investors. Tax conditions are better, administrative processes are simple, and international talent feels welcome. Public commitment also matters. Through the Spanish Society for Technological Transformation, our Spanish government supports the growth of the high-tech industry. We can already see the results. Spanish companies such as Cabify, Lobo, Job and Talent, and TravelPerk show that startups can be born in Spain and compete at global level. They also inspire new funders and send strong messages to international investors.
But this success is not only about ranking or numbers. This is about supporting people with ideas and with ambition.
It is about supporting startups that want to grow and scale. And it is about a country that believes in innovation as a source of opportunity.
Today, Spain is one of the best places in Europe to start a company, to invest, and to grow technology projects.
And we will continue working together to build a stronger, more innovative, and more digital future for Europe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all our distinguished guests for sharing your perspectives. To close today's event and reflect on what comes next, I'm pleased to invite Linda Capusa, Operations Director of ESNA, for the final remarks. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to all of our speakers today. As today's discussion has shown, the Startup Nation Standards Report 2025 is not an endpoint, but part of an ongoing process. It reflects how far Europe has come to create more startup-friendly policy frameworks, and just as importantly, where further efforts are needed. One of the strengths of the Startup Nation Standards is that they provide a shared language for policymakers across Europe. That makes it easier to exchange experiences, learn from what works, and also address the common challenges together. The results presented today show encouraging progress, while also confirming that consistent implementation remains key. Regulatory reform, talent mobility, access to finance, and social inclusion are complex areas that require sustained coordination and political commitment. ESNA's role is to support this journey by providing evidence, facilitating peer learning, and working closely with national authorities as well as the European institutions to translate policy ambition into practical outcomes. We encourage all stakeholders to engage with the report, use it as a policy reference and in discussions, and continue contributing to the shared European effort. Thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you for your words, Linda. That brings us to the end of today's Startup Nation Standards Report 2025 launch. A big thank you to all our speakers, steering committee members, and country representatives for their contributions. We invite you to explore the full report on ESNA's website and to follow the conversation across our social media channels, where we'll be sharing highlights and insights from today's event. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.